Knives. They're a staple part of many a bushcrafter's wet dream, but not everybody's. Join me in this video to find out whether I'm a knife nerd or a knife novice, and maybe you can self-diagnose which of those categories you fall into yourself as well. Hi folks, I'm Craig Taylor, and as always a huge thanks for joining me here on my YouTube channel, The Bushcraft Padawan. Thanks for joining me in this week's Thursday Store, and if you're not yet a subscriber, then click on that subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of your screen right now so you don't miss any future videos. We're talking about knives today. If I cast my very failing memory back a very long time, I remember being bought my very first knife, which was a very small 2 or 3 blade at most Swiss Army knife. I was bought it by my granddad Ray and my nana Jean, and I must have been, I don't know, something like 9 or 10, something along those lines. I also remember not long after that going on a school trip to France for a week or so, and I remember coming back with a folding, locking, open L carbon steel blade. Going on a school trip at 11 or 12 and coming back with a knife. Couldn't do that nowadays, right? If I think back through my history of using knives, when I first started thinking through this video, I thought to myself, yeah, I haven't had a lot of knives, I haven't had a lot of exposure to knives. And actually that's not true, because as I've just said, I was bought my very first knife at sort of 9, 10, 11 years of age, bought the open L on a school trip, and then throughout my adult life, I've used a range of knives. I used to carry a folding Normark steel knife in the top pocket of my smock when I was in the army. That used to accompany me whenever I went outdoors in the field and exercise operations training. That was in my top pocket. Back in barracks, I used to carry on my belt a folding Gerber tool with, amongst other things, a blade on that. On the odd occasion when I was deployed to tropical or jungle regions, I used to take, not this particular one, this is a newer version, but I used to take a machete or a parang out in the field with me then. I used to do a lot of climbing in my army days, so on my climbing harness, attached with some prusik cord and a carabiner, was a Petzl sawtooth blade there to help me cut rope and webbing straps. That used to accompany me whenever I was climbing. And then of course I left the army and I got into the whole bushcraft scene, and my first knife was a Mora Companion. I then upgraded to a Mora Companion HD. I then went to a proprietary knife through a third party provider that I won't mention. That wasn't a great experience, so I finally ended up where I am today, with my Mora Garberg carbon steel blade, and very, very happy I am with it too. So I've used over my prepubescent, pubescent and adult life a range of knives for a range of different reasons, probably in a range of different grinds, steels, hardnesses and all that sort of knife nerd type stuff, and that's what I want to talk about in today's video. You'll notice that I have retreated under my tarp. The rain is getting much heavier, and even though the camera was just at the entrance to the tarp there when I was stood outside, it was still getting quite wet, and that's obviously quite a worry from a malfunctioning perspective. So I've brought myself and the camera well underneath the tarp. Here's the point that I want to make in today's video. It wasn't until I got into the bushcraft side of life, the bushcraft scene, that I even really became aware that there was a carbon steel and a stainless steel. I guess I'd kind of been aware of it on the periphery. Sheffield steel, the open L blade that I bought as a schoolboy had carbon written on there, so I guess I'd been aware of it. I'd been exposed to the fact there were 2 different steels or 2 different metals, but it really didn't make a difference. I hadn't got a clue until I started bushcrafting that there were flat grinds, hollow grinds, convex, concave, Scandi and all the different types of grinds. Hadn't got a clue. hadn't got a clue about thicknesses of steel or the Rockwell, is it Rockwell, the hardness of the steels, hadn't got a clue. And yet I'd been using knives for one purpose or another for a very, very long time, but it was only my exposure to bushcraft that brought it to the fore that there was a lot potentially to think about when buying, selecting, sourcing, using a knife. And yet I'd arrived at using my knives through no sort of prior knowledge, just dumb good luck or bad luck, I guess you could say. I do not consider myself to be, and I use these words in the kindest of ways, I'm not having a pop at anybody that really is into the knife scene, but from a clickbaity perspective, I don't consider myself to be a knife nerd. Those sorts of things never really, in fact they didn't ever factor in my buying decisions or use decisions. They factor a little more now, I must admit. The fact that I know about these things, they're things that I vaguely take some consideration of. Certainly the steel type, the metal type, and the type of grind, they're the two determining factors for me. But things like angle of grind and hardness of steels and all that sort of stuff, it's all completely lost on me. I am very firmly considering myself a knife newbie and not a knife nerd. Please don't take offence if you consider yourself to be one. So that's my position. I use a knife because it is the right type of metal for the sort of environment I'm likely to find myself in, steel or stainless steel or carbon. I am a novice and a newbie sharpener, so I use a Scandi grind because apparently it's the easiest to learn to sharpen and to keep sharp. And I'll be really, really honest, my third buying decision is around the cost. I don't have a great deal of disposable income, so being able to justify what I'm buying, and should it ever go wrong, be able to justify buying another one, they're the three factors in my knife wisdom making decisions. I am a knife newbie. I understand what these things mean now. They don't really make a big difference to my buying decisions though. So that's me. I'm a knife newbie, a knife novice, not a knife nerd. What about you? Are you somebody who really, really goes into the detail of these things? Is it something of a side interest of yours? And again, I'm not calling you out on that. I think it's wonderful to have that desire to dive into a specific subject and a specific tool type in greater depth. Are you somebody that focuses on that type of thing? Is it really, really key to you to understand the DNA, for want of a better phrase, of the knife that you're using? Or are you like me? If it gets good reviews online and you can afford it, it'll do for you. That's the sort of camp that I fall into. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks as always for tuning in to another Thursday's Thoughts video. I look forward to reading your responses. I read every single one and desperately try to answer every single one as well. I think I've got a good track record in that area. Thanks as always for watching. Once again, if you're not yet a subscriber, click on that subscribe button bottom right hand corner of your screen and stay tuned for another video very soon. Cheers.